Hello and welcome to this special episode of Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway, and we're coming to you from Dallas, Texas at Fire Rescue International, and I have an opportunity to participate in a near-miss expert panel discussion talking about near-miss lessons learned. I'm joined by Chief Josh Waldo from Oakridge, Tennessee. He's an active member of the IFC's Safety, Health, and Survival section, and Andrew Beck, the training officer of Mandan City Fire Department in North Dakota. In this episode, we're going to take on three near-miss cases and share perspectives and take some input from the audience. Now, I'll have to apologize in advance that some of the audio from the audience input might be a little bit difficult to hear and understand. Some of the folks in the audience chose not to use the microphone that was provided to them by the moderator, so you might have to strain just a little bit to hear the audience questions and inputs, and for that I apologize. I didn't want to cut any of it out though, because it was all good stuff. So let's jump right into the near-miss expert panel review of three cases that were discussed at Fire Rescue International in Dallas, Texas.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this session on an expert panel discussion for dissection of near misses and lessons learned. My name is Reed Hodgen. I'll be the moderator of the session this afternoon. I am joined here by staff associated with the near miss program, Ms. Laura Bell, who is the program manager for the near miss program, and also Meredith O'Brien with Off Track, who is one of the technical support persons for the overall program. Any questions you have, we will refer to them or to our expert panel as we go forward. So this is an interactive session. There will be plenty of opportunity for you to give your input and to ask your questions of the panel. We'll make sure that that happens effectively as well. Lessons learned from responses, both the successes, the problems that occur, and those near misses, represent our best opportunities to learn and improve. They're a key to more effectively saving lives and property. In this panel discussion, we're going to cover and dissect three cases from the International Association of Fire Chiefs National Near Miss Database, which I hope you're all familiar with. Our experts will reveal and debate the preferred tactics and strategies for each case. You, the audience, will then weigh in with your solutions. Our objective is to produce a better understanding of the range of thought on how to respond to key lessons learned in public safety emergencies. Our expert panel today is comprised of members of the firefighting and public safety community. I'm going to give you an introduction to them right now, and then we'll get started on the discussions. Josh Waldo is Deputy Fire Chief of the Oakridge, Tennessee Fire Department. Chief Waldo is a 15-year student of the Fire Service who is a triple designee from the Center for Public Safety Excellence and is currently enrolled in the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program. Chief Waldo holds a master's degree in safety, security, and emergency management and a bachelor's degree in fire science and engineering technology. Chief Waldo is an active member of the IAFC's Safety and Health section and the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Also joining us today is Andrew Beck. Andrew is a training officer and a firefighter EMT for the Mandan City Fire Department in Mandan, North Dakota. Andrew has worked there since 2006. Prior to that, he was employed as a wildland firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 5 years, working both in suppression and in prescribed fire. Andrew manages the live fire program for the Mandan City Fire Department, instructs with the structural burn simulator program at the North Dakota State Fire School, and previously taught in the Fireground Survival Program. Andrew also has a background in crew resource management and incident decision making. Also joining us today is Dr. Richard Gasaway. He's a speaker, author, consultant, scientist, and a retired fire chief. He's widely considered to be one of the nation's leading authorities on human factors, situational awareness, and the decision-making processes used in high-stress, high-consequence work environment. His work has been chronicled in more than 350 books, book chapters, journals, and website articles, and he's delivered more than 3,000 presentations to over 38,000 first responders, business leaders, and industrial professionals worldwide. Dr. Gasaway has served over 30 years in fire, EMS, rescue, and emergency management, and has held positions of firefighter, EMT, paramedic. So that's our expert panel today. What we're going to do is to grab 3 cases from the near miss program. I'll read those cases to you. You have them handed out. And then we're going to turn them over to the panel to discuss strategy, tactics, and what they think about the lessons learned from those cases. Okay, so this case is about mass crazing during a training burn. I'm going to go through the specifics of the case, and then we'll start talking about it. During the first iteration of an afternoon training session on wind-driven fire training, a firefighter experienced crazing of his mask. There was no injury reported pertaining to the event. Upon reviewing accounts of the event from several of the instructors present, there were 3 main contributing factors to the event. 1, ambient temperatures in the area were warmer than they had previously been for drills. They were warmer than they had previously been for drills. This resulted in additional preheating of the fire behavior building and a decreased amount of cooling occurring after the morning sessions. The amount of fuel utilized, 3 pallets, was not reduced for this burn, resulting in an increased amount of heat in the interior of the building. Only 2 pallets were used in the next iteration, resulting in a decreased level of heat and a more manageable evolution. 2, there was a delayed reaction in calling for ventilation and water from the instructor inside, tasked with this role. Basically, the products of combustion, that's smoke, were allowed to bank down to about the 60% level versus 40%, which has been a norm throughout the drills. This 40% level has been predetermined through many train-the-trainer burns that were done in order to understand the dynamics of the structure and to ensure instructors were consistently prepared to deliver the drills. The approximately 20-second delay in calling for water resulted in increased temperatures in the interior of the structure. 3rd, the firefighter positioned himself in a manner allowing for increased exposure to flames and heat. He was told numerous times to get down and stay low by the instructors in the building. Regardless of the reason why, the firefighter failed to move into a lower stance or to a more protected position, which contributed to his mask being exposed to a high level of heat. Direct flame impingement may have occurred for a very brief period of time, a few seconds. However, this has not been confirmed. The primary lessons learned. Training for fire poses one of the biggest threats that we face. Because of the fact that we don't respond to fires every day, we sometimes take for granted how dangerous the job can be. When this occurs, we try to overcome that lack of exposure on the training ground by building huge, hot, smoky fires and making entry to get to the burn and the smoke, to get the time of the burn and the smoke that we thrive on. The reality is that we need to take training scenarios very seriously and treat them as if the situation were real. The life safety of ourselves and our crew has to come first. There's no reason in today's fire service, with all of the technological advancements that we've seen with PPE and with SCBA, that any firefighter should get hurt or even come close in a training event. We're all accountable for each other's personal safety, health, and welfare. Okay, so I'd like to turn this over to you to give us the first input. Go ahead.
I think one thing that jumps out in this one is a lot of times when we look at live fire events, there can tend to be a real problem if you got to kind of plan your flight and fly your plan. And I think it's really, really easy on a day of live fire to not, one or two things, not always have a real clear goal. You know, we always say you should have training goals, and sometimes you can get away with not having real solid ones. If you go on, we're going to go do ladders and just kind of see where it goes. So when we get into live fire, we got to have a definite idea of what we want to accomplish, and whether it's flash over training or wind-driven fire or it's just basic fire attack, and then make sure we stick with that. Because I think sometimes when we start deviating from it, you can start having problems. And then the other issue that they brought up here is you have to really understand fire dynamics and the difference between temperature and the amount of heat energy that's moving around in the building. So as you do subsequent burns, your time to flash over is going to get a lot shorter. And I think that just comes with again, having a good plan and having a good strategy. This one, they talked about reducing fuels, and only letting it bank down so far. And at some point, they deviated from that plan. And a lot of times, depending on what kind of an evolution we're doing, we could be right on the ragged edge of that, of something flashing. And that can be a valid thing to do if you've got, a smoke layer up there and you want to push it to where you start seeing some rollover and everything for the crews to be able to understand that and to pencil it a couple times to try to push it back and control it. But you have to understand that you're perilously close to having it actually flash at that point. So you have to have kind of a plan in place that if you're going to let it go that far and stop, then that's what you need to do. And so I think it's like a lot of things that, this was a burn that probably was just a tiny bit out of spec for normal for that department. But, it's the way I say it's the 100th fire. You do everything 99 times and nothing happens, and then you let it get a tiny bit out of spec, and the 100th time again we're having an issue. So I guess my big takeaway would be to really have a plan for your live fire days, what your goals are, and what exactly you're trying to get out of every evolution, and then stick with that. And if you have to vary it from it, it should be something you're having a few people talking about real quick, and have a powwow and make sure that it's something you really want to put on the road to change.
Okay. Josh?
I agree with you on that, and the part that stands out to me here is that they had established some hard, fast procedures that were supposed to be followed during a training evolution. And the minute that you deviate from those procedures, your risk level is increasing just dramatically. As instructors, we want to provide realistic training because that's what we're demanding of from our folks a lot. But at the same time, that does not give us the right to bypass these safety standards that we have put in place. Because once you do that, things are going to go south in a hurry. We also, as instructors, have the responsibility when things aren't going to plan, pull the plug, start over. There's no sense in continuing down this path. For this instance, we have a firefighter who's repeatedly being told to get out. It's not happening. The heat and smoke conditions are beyond what we're typically allowed. And you can see by not pulling the plug, this thing had the potential to go way worse than it did. And the thing that scares me about that even more is what if nothing happened? Now we have taught this firefighter what just happened is okay because there was no negative consequence. So it's great to hear that the firefighter wasn't injured, but it's also good to some extent that the firefighter didn't get this normalized, that this is an acceptable practice, this is how you can operate in a real scenario, because this is training. And it says clearly, no one should ever get hurt in training. So pushing it beyond those established safety procedures, we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Richard, to you, sir.
As I looked at this incident, I read through and I probably have more questions than I have answers. And what I would give for the opportunity to ask some more specific questions of both the report writer and the people who were involved in this incident, because I think it's dangerous to judge based on just one small narrative here, because we're getting maybe a 30% representation of the full understanding of what occurred, and that's really all that can come from a report that's submitted by an individual like this. But one of the things that was said was there was a delay in the reaction of calling for ventilation and water, and I don't know why I wondered why wasn't there water in there already. They delayed in calling for the water, and I don't know if that means the water was in there and they delayed in telling them to open the nozzle, or the water wasn't in there at all. And if those firefighters were inside, even the instructor inside, I'm not the one totally versed on 1403 burn standard now. I was when I was active duty and doing live fire training, but I don't want to say that I know a chapter and verse. But I thought that when an instructor is inside serving in a position of safety, that they're supposed to have a safety line with them. As you guys that do that active training, you got to correct me if I goof that up. So that water, I would think that there would have been or could have been, or maybe should have been, without passing judgment, water in there for that instructor to deploy and control that fire, if things were, banking down or, getting worse. 20 seconds doesn't seem like a lot of time, but in the environment of changing conditions, 20 seconds is a lot of time. And another thing, they leave some really important questions unanswered, and maybe they just don't know the answer. But they said, they spent a lot of time making sure the instructors were well trained and trained the trainer, but then the instructor did not seem to do things to how they would have wanted them done. And I'd like to understand, did they not train the instructor properly, or was the instructor deviating from what he was trained? But the one thing that probably caused me the greatest concern in this whole report was where it said for numerous times the firefighter was told to stay low by the instructor in the building, and regardless of the reason why. And I went, what? Regardless of the reason why? That is entirely what I want to know, is the reason why. Why did that firefighter not do what he was instructed to do? Was he being defiant? Was he misunderstanding? Was the instructor not being clear in what he was instructing him to do? Was he frozen and didn't know how to react? But a whole lot of what happened here with this firefighter, the answer lays in understanding what caused that firefighter's behavior to be what it was and why he didn't get low. Because depending on what his answer would be, would help me to give them some advice about how to avoid things like this in the future. Not just depending on what it was, a firefighter in the real fire might be told to get low, and he wouldn't get low in a real fire too. This is a symptom of a problem. So what I would encourage this department to do, or a department that has a similar near miss like this, is to do something called thin slicing, and that is to take what happened and ask why a whole bunch of times. Why? Explanation. Why? Further explanation. Why? Further explanation. Trying to kind of, as I explained to Laura at one time, peel back the layers of the onion. We're seeing the surface. We're seeing in this report some symptoms without really knowing some core explanations, and they're just not here. And I'd hate to assume that I know those core explanations. Employing Stephen Covey's principle of seek first to understand and then to be understood. I'd like to understand a whole lot more about this from them who experienced it before I would try to have an audience understand my explanation for why things like this happen. And I'd rather help them and you try to figure out why things like this made sense to them at that time. Why were they doing those things? And because they made sense to them. But but why did it make sense? Why did it seem like the right thing to do? Why did it seem okay not to have a hose line in there? Did they know the 1403 burn standard? Were they complying with it? The way they speak, they seem very sophisticated in their understanding of fire behavior. So for there not to be a water line in there, or for that instructor not to call for ventilation in time, seems inconsistent with what I would think this. It just in general, I get the sense that the department has their act together when it comes to doing a training burn. So I'm a little confused by how some of these things morphed into what they were. I'd love the chance to thin slice this and dig deeper. And what I would encourage them and anybody in the audience to do is, when you're going to do an incident like this, a training incident like this, is do some what-if planning. All right. So what if the fire gets out of control? What if the hose line malfunctions? What if this happens? What if? And try to have those alternate plans. In Carl Weick's book of Managing the Unexpected, he talks about expecting the unexpected. That's what the what-if planning does, is allows you to look and say, okay, if everything would go well, we'd expect these things. But what if something unexpected, like the smoke banks down quicker, because the building, I personally would not have thought about the building being heated like that, and while they provide that as an explanation, I don't know if that's viable or not, or true or not. It certainly wouldn't have been something that would have been on my radar of saying, well, they should have seen that, the building didn't have time to cool down. I don't think I would have picked that one up. I don't know why. Just like, it makes sense, but I don't know if it's really, those people who use burn buildings of whatever kind this is, I don't know if this is metal or block or,
So I've heard a few things so far that there were issues associated with having procedures but not following them, issues of not following instructions, issues of the instructor not knowing, not making the decision to pull the plug on the session at the right time, actual safety procedures associated with having water in the building instead of having to call for it, and then behavioral issues associated with the firefighter for he did something that's obviously wrong, and why was that occurring, and what could we learn from that in the way of root cause that would allow us to change procedures or change training, etc. So I hear all of those. I'm going to go to the audience for a minute, and then I'll come back to you folks for closing remarks on this one.
Sure.
So to the audience, what I'd like to ask is, you do one of two things if you could help me out, is either tell me about a similar event you had that you learned something from, that we can learn from, that elaborates on this, or give us your opinion in the same way that our expert panel did of what you saw going on here and what the key lessons learned are. So I'll go back here first. And you can be anonymous, or you can keep your name and your department if you wish.
My name is Jeff Van Fire Chief of Cortez, Colorado. One thing I've seen in 30 years with the live fire training aspect of it is a lot of firefighters take that opportunity to get their badge of honor, so-called, get their gear dirty, get their helmets melted. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen firefighters come out and actually damage their gear that they can't use it, which is ridiculous. Yeah. And the second part too is, you're changing the standard for live fire training where the instructors are certified, are going to have to be certified now for that. And I think the instructors are the worst enemies out there. Like you mentioned, setting these fires so hot. We can't teach our firefighters to go into these fires. We need to let them go into a fire. When it gets this hot, this is when you turn around and leave. You won't keep going in. The memory stuff when you go into these training fires. I was in this fire, it was super hot. I can do this in a house. I can do this. It's a big, it's a totally different situation with this construction and everything compared to a training tower. So I think it's both. A lot of firefighters get in there and they want to get dirty, they want to get this mouth and stuff, and instructors encourage that to some degree. And then again, I think, we again, teach our firefighters need to turn around and get out and, like I said, we damage your gear to training fire gear. It's tough.
Right.
Comments from up there, and I'm going to go to our next person.
One of the things that we're doing, and this came to me as an epiphany as I started to understand the neuroscience of decision making, is we're setting firefighters up to fail because we're not teaching firefighters how to do what we would really want them to do in a real scenario. For example, I just throw it out there in the audience. You don't have to answer. Just think to yourself, how many times have you ever been in a training burn, in a training building, with a fire, and the instructor said, okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to say it's too hot, back out, back out, back out. We never do that. We put the fire out every single time. Or how many times have you ever been in there searching for Rescue Randy, and the instructor said, okay, conditions have changed. Heavy, thick, black, angry smokes come all the way down to the floor. Turn and get out, go, 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 get out. Get out? What do you mean? You mean stop trying to rescue Randy? Yeah. Because you're going to become the victim here real quick if you don't turn and get out now. Go, go, go. We're not training that. What we're doing is we're training, and it was just in the next room, and I was talking for anybody who was in there about mission myopia. So being focused on the mission of fire attack that we'll attack that fire until we win or it kills us. So focused on rescue, we'll go in and we'll be on the mission of rescue until we rescue them or it kills us. And that's exactly how we're training. We need, if we're going to get firefighters to be smart firefighters, resilient problem solvers, we got to teach them how to make the decision to either A, not go in at all, because of conditions, or B, when you're in there and the conditions turn in a bad direction, you abandon your mission and rescue yourself. And we are not training firefighters to do that.
And how much would it help on a training evolution if we what-ifed it from the beginning? Okay, here's the scenario, and let's go ahead and clarify some things. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Make it very clear from the get-go that if we have this deviation, this is what we're going to do. Because a lot of times when we get in these training fires, I'm not coming out because they're going to talk about me.
Yeah, right.
It's just I'm not going to do that. If we could pre-plan that on the front end, that this is the expectation, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I think it just makes us that much safer.
Along with what Chief Waldo's saying, you got to remember that when you write your burn plan and you identify your trigger points and you come up with your goals for the day, you're doing that in a calm environment where you can use a good decision-making process, not one you'd use in an emergency, and you're building in a margin of safety. So if you don't follow that in the field and things get out of spec, you immediately are consuming that margin of safety. And at the point where you consume all of that margin of safety, somebody's going to get hurt. So you got to remember when there needs to be a deviation from that. As soon as you deviate from that plan, even the least little bit, you're beginning to consume that. It's kind of like an emergency air supply. You really shouldn't be using that up, as a tactical objective. So.
Right, and you're producing negative training. As you
Right,
said,
absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to go to another one from our own. I'm Chris Hale, I'm a safety officer from Brazos County. One of the things, first off, I think, in agreement with y'all, we've got to go back to training our firefighters to be risk-based firefighters.
Right.
We don't do that. Typically in training, that doesn't start to the officer level. We need to start doing that as soon as we're bringing our firefighters in.
Yep.
With regards to this incident, I want to make a comment about the report sounds very sophisticated. Is this a case of a book-smart fire department versus a fire department that's very understanding of what live fire training should be?
Right.
And the other is, where is the safety officer in this case?
Right. Exactly.
When we do live fire, I've got an interior and an exterior safety officer.
You have to.
On all live fire evolutions, and if that's what's going on inside the structure, he should have called.
Well, and when you have somebody freeze like that, that can happen for a lot of reasons, but if you have a well-written burn plan and you've got your safety people and you got your secondary line in there, maybe that person froze because they just were brand new. I've had that happen a lot. But if you follow your plan and you have that second line in there, and you got that instructor in there, you're going to be able to handle that unexpected event. Or if you've deviated from that, you're going to have problems.
All right, we have a comment over here. I'll take this last one. We're going to move on to our next scenario. So get ready for the EMS scenario, gentlemen.
I know it's hard because we're kind of seeing you're doing money over.
Yeah, right.
However, I think we're kind of going down the wrong track. I think in this report here looking at is blaming the firefighter. I think the bigger issue here isn't the firefighter, it's the training.
Right.
And I think that we, as a fire service whole week, need to expose our firefighters. Because I look at this, and having read some fatality reports of firefighters during live training, where they've been exposed to heat for 4 or 5 hours, and their bodies can't handle it. Maybe this firefighter wasn't being stupid, wasn't trying to get his helmet, after the his helmet. Maybe he actually was overheated and was having a medical condition. So, as instructors in these types of events, we really need to stop and instantly stop training and take care of firefighters. Because that is our number one priority. It's not the training, it's taking care of firefighters.
Well, I think it's a cultural issue in that we've got to make sure that people understand it's okay to pull the plug. It's okay to say, stop, this isn't working. Let's back up and figure out what's going on here before we keep pressing further down the road.
Yep. I think I'll make a last comment of my own here for just a second as I get ready to pull up the next one. There looks like there may be hidden in here a train the trainer issue as well, because they trained over and over and over again from a train the trainer to handle a specific set of conditions. And when the conditions that showed up that day were different, they could not adapt and decide what to do. They could only do what they had been trained to do by rote practice. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I noticed there as well. So having trainers who understand what the intent is and what the safety rules are, so that they're empowered and they know when to pull the plug if conditions get out of hand is important too, I think.
Agreed.
Okay, here's an interesting one. Oh, by the way, as we go forward, I'm going to make a quick plug for near miss. The wealth of discussion we had just now did not come from a report on a fatality or a major injury. It came from a report about a near miss, a case where something happened, but we didn't actually lose a firefighter over it. So this is a bit of a plug for all of you to participate in the near miss program itself, because of what it really brings to all of us in the way of lessons learned. Okay, so we're going to look at weapons found during a routine medical call, a case from the near miss database. Okay, Engine 1 responded to an unresponsive patient on a riding lawnmower. While en route, dispatch advised us that the patient was inside a fence and that there were 2 bystanders on the scene. Engine 1 requested law enforcement to respond due to the nature of the call. Engine 1 arrived on scene and found the patient unresponsive when sitting on the riding lawnmower. The lawnmower was shut off by the bystanders prior to the arrival of the firefighters. Engine 1 personnel disconnected the battery to the lawnmower and started gathering information from the bystanders as well as performing patient care. The patient was moved to the ground where a more thorough assessment could be performed. Law enforcement arrived on scene, and while they were moving the patient. While performing the assessment, the crew found a loaded pistol, a razor blade, and 2 knives on the patient. These items were removed and turned over to law enforcement for safekeeping. When EMS arrived on the scene, the patient was moved to the stretcher. Prior to loading the patient onto the ambulance, the patient woke up and immediately began refusing care. After talking with the patient, it appeared that he had overdosed on the combination of pain medication and alcohol. The patient eventually refused care and was left on the scene. The lesson learned here, as reported, was that size up starts from the time we're dispatched to the time that we return home. Situational awareness played a key role in successfully and safely handling this call. And the mishap was associated with the fact that law enforcement should have been involved, and that they needed to search the patient carefully, because you never know what you're going to find. Okay, who would like to handle this first? Okay,
We'll start here.
We'll go to you, Josh.
I read this one, and I feel like I'm reading a run report from my own department, because they handled this pretty much like I would expect our folks to. I would like to have heard the entire dispatch. I'd like to know, why did they request law enforcement? Was there something in the dispatch information, or is this just standard procedure for them? If this is just comes out as unresponsive, is this a cardiac? Is this diabetic? Is it heat? What prompted them to get law enforcement there? And I guess my question would be, if you needed law enforcement, why didn't you wait? But I don't know that without having all the details and hearing the whole run report. But the point I get from this, they're scene size up. It starts from the time you leave the station. Really, it starts from your dispatch. You're conducting that size up the whole way there, and it never stops. We routinely teach size up as that first 60 seconds on scene. We make the lap around the house or whatnot. Size up is from dispatch until you are back in the station. It never stops. You've got to keep up with what's going on. Honestly, without knowing more about this one, do I think my department would have handled it any differently? I'm not real sure. And I think sometimes, we do get lucky. We do get lucky. But it's important to just keep situational awareness of what's going on around you and your crew at all times, because you never know what the next changing event's going to be. So we can't get complacent. But I do wish I knew more of the details about this run.
Yeah, I understand. Dr. Gasaway, do you have a comment?
I want to take a moment to extend my appreciation to the International Association of Fire Chiefs for giving me the opportunity to present on situational awareness, lightning round 30 barriers of situational awareness while at FRI this week. I sincerely appreciate the chance to share those lessons with the Company Officer Leadership Institute attendees and others who sat in on the program. We had a great turnout and a great discussion. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness or attending a live event or the online academy, I'd like to share with you how you can do that now. If you're interested in attending a live event, you can check out the Situational Awareness Matters tour stop schedule at samatters.com. Click on the Program and Keynotes tab below the header, then click on the Events Schedule tab. If I'm in your area, I hope you'll consider attending a live event. If you're not able to attend a live event, consider signing up for the SA Matters Online Academy. The Academy contains videos and articles that cover the same content as the 3-day live tour event, delivered in 14 modules that you can go through at your own pace from your own computer. The Academy Plus version includes 4 books that are referenced throughout the Academy. The Plus version is a great bargain because the tuition simply covers the costs of the books, making the Academy free. Just click on the link below the header on the SA Matters homepage titled Online Academy. Okay, once again, we're at Fire Rescue International in Dallas, Texas. Let's rejoin the near-miss expert panel discussion with Chief Josh Waldo, Training Officer Andrew Beck, and myself, and we are sharing our perspective on an EMS near-miss event. I was curious as to why they called law enforcement was a standard procedure, was something said in the dispatch that caused them to flag that. There's an interesting phenomena occurring in how we train medical personnel. I think back to when I was trained as an EMT. I was National Registry EMT and then eventually paramedic. And we would go through these scenarios in practice and then also in our formal evaluations, where the evaluator would have a form that says, okay, here's the evaluation form, here's your patient is over here, you guys are over here, and I'm going to give you a scenario, and you have to go through and do everything according to National Registry. Okay, so I got the checkoff form, so what's the first thing you're going to do? Scene safe and BSI. Scene safe and BSI. And sadly, I was trained, and many are trained, to do this. In my training scenario, I'm going to say, first thing, scene safe and BSI. Check, check. Those are automatic failures on the test. So, you learn quick. You say scene safe and BSI. And I have been in programs where I have had 100 people in the audience, and I say, okay, y'all know what I'm talking about here, right? Scene safe and BSI? Yeah. All right. Raise your hand if anyone along the way in your training ever taught you how to make sure a scene is safe. Crickets. One or two, or one who's maybe a cop and also a medically trained person. So few firefighters or medical responders have ever been taught how to make sure a scene is safe. What we do instead is we arrive on the scene and we say, scene safe and BSI. And we say scene safe like we're commanding it. Scene, be safe! Okay, it is. Let's go in and do our work. Without really being alert to the clues and the cues and the signs and the indicators that this scene might not be safe. And as I was reading through this, I was just kind of, let's give the audience maybe something to take away from this. So I'm thinking, all right, what makes a person commit an act of violence? And I don't have all the answers, but I come up with somebody who's angry. They commit an act of violence. Somebody who's afraid. They think you're going to harm them, so they react to that in the form of violence. Somebody who's confused about, are you trying to help me? Are you trying to hurt me? Maybe they're not from America and they see somebody in a uniform as an authority figure and they're confused by that. Or somebody who has an altered level of consciousness from, drugs or alcohol, who are not thinking clearly. That's why a lot of fights happen in bars, because people have altered, levels of good judgment from alcohol. So, if you think about, if I'm going to an incident where there's the potential for my patient or someone else at the incident scene to be angry, fraught with fear, confused, or altered level of consciousness, those should all be red flags flying, alerting me to the potential of violence. It doesn't tell me necessarily that the person has a gun, but he had an altered level of consciousness, and that should alert me that if he would, say, regain that, then he might be angry or confused or fearful that all of a sudden, hey, here you are in my face. You weren't there, Of course, I was, unconscious. Now I'm back. So, anytime you're going to a call like that, and I think they were rightfully so. They had an unresponsive person. It seems like they were alert to that clue, and they said in the process of doing the assessment. Now, I don't know if that means, of assessing for injuries, or they literally swipe the person looking for weapons, and there's a process in which you kind of, do like the pat down to see if the person has weapons. But, they were able to find these weapons on this victim. And the question that I would have for the crew that would be kind of like the tell-all for me was, when you found the weapons, did you find what you were expecting to find, or were you surprised by what you found? And that would actually help connect the dots to how strong their situational awareness was. In other words, were they giving this person the pat down on the anticipation that this person, for whatever clues are present, and I don't want to say what they are, I don't know what they were, we would expect this person might have weapons, and therefore we're looking for them, and in fact we found them. Or no, we were literally just, patting down for injuries, and oh, look at that, there's a gun. That would tell me a whole lot about the situational awareness of the crew. They say their essay played a key role in their successful outcome, so that tells me that they might have suspected that this person might be, carrying or have something, and they may have been looking for it with intent.
Got it. Andrew, I'm going to go to you next.
I think the biggest thing that I thought about is there's a big push right now for crew resource management, and kind of changing how we operated in the past. It was real paramilitary, and if there was a rank above you there, that person was in charge, and they'll let you know when they need something. But I think more and more we're moving toward, if you see something, say something. We see that in everything from buses in New York to fire training classes, and I think it's really improved. We want good communication to flow among a crew, because there's a good chance that if we get into a situation like this, it may not be the company officer or the medic that notices it. It might be the newest guy in the crew. And if we're passing that information around, it's going to help out everybody's situational awareness. Because there's always that chance that if you have 2, 3, 4 people on an apparatus when they get there, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 different viewpoints of what's going on, especially in a rapidly developing situation. So it's always a good idea to make sure guys are relaying information to each other and talking and operating like that. You're going to get a lot farther. You got 4 sets of eyes instead of 1.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the things that I've heard that are important here is gain situational awareness. Scene safety means you actively work on ensuring the safety of the scene yourself when you arrive. Situational awareness is important in this case. You're not exactly sure how it occurred, but it's evident that it did, and it made a significant difference there. And so we see some of these factors coming into play in this particular case, and then also communication among all the parties, and to see something, say something. You don't know who's going to get the idea that something sounds weird here, but somebody can come up with that, and that can influence the whole response. When I read the response, this one looks like there was something that happened before they arrived on the scene that cued them in to they needed law enforcement. And that almost feels like it must have been the dispatch, the 911 call, something that they heard from the caller probably told them that there was something going on here. And, maybe somebody said, I don't know if he's been shot or he's been violent today or something that may have caused them to do this based on the dispatch call itself. Okay. Very good. Any further comments from the table here in response to each other as I go down to the audience on this one? Okay. Same thing for the audience. Anybody had anything like this happen before? And what can you tell us about it, or what can you comment on this particular case? And I'd like to get 3 or 4 comments as I go on this one.
I just wanted to say that I thought that a lot lot of this depends on the culture of the department.
Yeah.
So I started my firefighter career in LA City, and so I worked in some really sketchy neighborhoods, and it was absolutely mandatory to check a room. I mean, I'm not being dramatic, a patient had been verbally moved to death. We didn't want it. Questions, who else is in the house? Who else is in the back room? Do you have weapons? Do you scan the hands at all times? Got some patients they're on the bed, sheets are down. So you do these things based on your culture, the environment. Then I moved my career, I go to Northern California, totally upscale community, and it never gets done. And in the first year, I watched our medics, including myself, load a patient in the ambulance with a loaded gun. Even the police didn't check, because again, it wasn't a high crime area. And I saw butcher knives found in secondary exams. So I think the challenge is that the culture of the department, you have to constantly reinforce it. And just because you work in a nice area, doesn't mean that people aren't going to go side with you. And in fact, it's almost more dangerous because you don't expect it. So I just keep referring back to the culture of safety and the culture of expecting you to deliver to the patients before you start working.
Yeah, that's a good
One of
point.
the comments I heard from the panel a few minutes ago was, okay, so if you call law enforcement because of the nature of the call, why did you go in and start working on the patient before law enforcement arrived? That seems to be a key comment as far as I'm concerned. Yes, sir. And by the way, you can't be anonymous, but you can also give us your name and your department.
Kevin Seaman, the Medical Department of Fire and Rescue, and we had a very similar situation, I think, was submitted to near miss and also we wrote the case report, but this was an engine crew that was called for unconscious patients in a commercial food structure, food processing, food kind of supply area. And this unconscious patient was in the middle of a walk-in freezer. The engine crew went in, and I believe one of the issues here, how much, and I agree with the comments about interviewing the witnesses, how much urgency was there with the fact that they were unconscious? Did that override decision-making that might be spent on scene safety or, anything? So I think that's one important. In this particular case I'm describing, the crew rushed in to care for this gentleman. It turned out that he had driven a propane-powered forklift into a closed space to change a light bulb. So the crew goes in, they have a carbon monoxide detector on their bag. They didn't hear it because they were so focused on the care of the patient. It was the second arriving crew that heard the alarm, evacuated the patient and the crew, and saved a lot of morbidity and mortality. One of my questions would be, I see two themes in these two cases, and that is that these are unpolished type of reports. What's the role of, say, someone like the safety officer having a checklist to go down and say, what were the human factors here, what were the decisions here, to really get to the basis? I agree with you, there were questions and answers from these cases, but I certainly echo the other comment that for whatever reason, the fact that they did do a CAT time to find it, I think really should be praised. Obviously, they saved possibly a number of problems.
Right, it's kind of the old joke, and they talk about what a garbage man expect when you turn the corner. Expect to see garbage, but we don't, I think a lot of times we go into calls, we don't expect to see, an EMS patient in a non-violent situation that has a weapon on them. We don't expect to turn the corner and see a fully involved house because we don't ever see that. But sometimes, almost kind of going through that in your head on the way, and more or less planning for, if we talked about doing a what if, helps sometimes because you can run an automatic alarm to a building, and everybody knows 100 times, the 101st time you're going to have fire blown out of the second floor window. The alarm might have done its job. But I think sometimes we can get lulled into that, not expecting something like that to happen.
Or even too, I guess the question would be, what if there's a conflict? What if dispatch has a clue that it might not be safe? You would roll up and see, here's a yard, you don't see any obvious weapons or obvious threat. So what do you do in that case if you decide to go in? Maybe there's been a hot wash afterwards to say, why did you decide that? What could you do different next time?
Well, let me take off on that for a second. From the standpoint of hot wash, events like this that may not get good written up, it's a kind of near miss, but it has obvious implications. Does your department capture these and safety officer do a review for something like this?
Well, I think we're at a unique place. We're a suburban department that has grown remarkably. We just
very recently created a Bureau for Occupational Safety and Health. So we're at the point where we're planning and trying to get down what we'll be doing and how we'll be doing it. I think that's what's exciting about this is we can really have an impact. I was in the Navy previously trained as a flight surgeon where we did use human factors analysis and near-miss analysis. Yes. Yeah. So I think that to me would be the way in the future, sort of try to plan that and actually. We put the same question to the other members of the audience. Do you and your department have experience with dealing with events of this sort, and how do you follow up with safety analysis or root cause analysis and the sort we talked about earlier? Anybody help me out, tell me how you operate?
We were fully along the fire. So here's a set of a whole bunch of problems when you don't have funds. We were automatic work, meeting. I personally have not seen but our protocol, even the laws of the state, would dictate that police will act.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions?
We've got one up front here.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Let me add that when I was in college, we responded to a motorcycle accident. I was, just a young EMT, and this guy was busted up pretty good, but he was conscious, and we got him loaded up, and we put him in the back of the ambulance, and he reached down in the front of his pants and pulled a revolver out, and I thought, this is it. We're dead. And he pulled it out, and he said to us, do something with this. I don't want the cops to know that I got a gun because I'm on parole. And he handed it to us. And we all of us, there was 3 of us in the back, got out of the ambulance. Patient abandonment, sorry, we abandoned the patient. We all got out of the ambulance, closed the door. We all got out of the ambulance, closed the door, and I remember my partner was holding the gun by the butt with 2 fingers, because apparently he'd not ever handled a gun before, and he had it by the butt with 2 fingers, and he walked it over to the cop, and the cop's like, where did that come from? And he said, the guy in the back of the ambulance just handed it to us. And we all felt like fools, including the officer who didn't pat the guy down. So when I read this one, I had a flashback of my college experience. These guys in this incident did a lot better than I did. I just didn't know any better. I was a naive kid that come from a small town, and like this gentleman, talk about in L.A. When you work in a city that sees that kind of violence, you have a vigilance for that. I come from a little town where people don't hurt people, and this person was not from our town. He was riding through on his motorcycle when he got in an accident. I don't remember where he was from, but he had a gun, and it was nowhere on our radar. We were all about treating his injuries, and he pulled that gun out, and I'm telling you what, I'll never forget it. I thought he was going to kill all 3 of us.
I think as our profession, or let's say our nature of our calls continues to change with what we're running into. We're seeing things every day that you come back to the station, and the immediate conversation is, you're not going to believe what we just had. I think it's best practice for us to keep our guard up at all times, and don't make assumptions based on neighborhoods that, this is a safe neighborhood, we shouldn't have any problems here. We let our guard down, complacency, and right there is where we get ourselves in trouble. So I think it serves us best as a profession to always kind of have that level of curiosity just a little bit higher than most others.
Very good. Another one from the audience.
Yes, actually, as relates to management of near misses, we usually use our SMS system, safety management system, where we go back and research and where we see things that went wrong, what could be done better, and what could be developed to avoid such incidents.
Yeah, that's huge. I think just having an attitude that when something happens and having a process there where it gets looked at, because I think if you don't have some kind of almost like a formal process like that, a lot of times maybe it won't get analyzed, and every time that it doesn't, you don't have those lessons. You may or never capture.
true.
Right, and sorry, Richard, I'm right over you. One of the keys there is SMS, safety management systems, are an example of root cause analysis. So if you say there's something going on deeper than every near miss we get, what is that, and what can we learn from it to change how we operate? You're going to save life. There's no question.
Well, there's so many lessons that come from reading the near misses. I don't know how many thousands of near miss reports there are, and you can search them by category and by so many different ways to get down to the types of incidents that your community would see. I mean, these people have a gift to give us by reporting these near misses. If circumstances were just slightly different, we would be reading a line of duty death report. But as it is, we have the gift that somebody survived, and now they're going to share with us what happened, and to the best of their knowledge, what they learned from it, and what their lesson and what their takeaway is. And the sad part about it is there's a lot of firefighters out there that don't know that the near-miss reporting system even exists. As much effort has been put into trying to educate the fire service about it, there's still, I often will have 100 people in the room, and who knows about the near-miss reporting system? A certain number of hands go up. Who's been there? A certain number of hands go up. Who's reported a near-miss? 4 hands will go up. 4 out of 100? They don't even know they've had near misses because they didn't, like this one. Nobody got hurt. Nobody came really all that close to getting hurt. But it was a near miss because if circumstances were just slightly different, there could have been casualties. Fire departments are having near misses every day and not reporting them because they don't even realize that they've had one because they had a good outcome.
And as good as the near miss system is, you're exactly right. For every one that's submitted, there's probably unknown amounts that aren't. So I think it's also important not only to share this information through the near miss system, but you've got to share it in-house. And that means across shifts, across stations, put the pride and the badge of courage down and make sure that the other companies within your organization know, hey, this happened to us, be aware of it, it's out there, spread that word.
Yeah, one of the things I think that we're seeing in this discussion, just with this audience, is these near misses are not isolated. We have, every department has something like this happen, and that means it's pretty pervasive. And there's a lot we should be doing about these, and near misses tell us something about ourselves and our operations that should cause us to learn to act differently. The fact that we only see one of these in the database because there's not a lot of people reporting, once you go ask around, everybody's got a story like this. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. And okay. Coming over to you.
I got a big mouth, so I don't need to.
Excellent.
At least that's all my guys tell me. One of the things I think we're going to see with OSHA making the move to try and regulate the fire service. We're going to see either the fire service will say, okay, we are going to start instituting safety management systems. We're going to start requiring in-house near-miss discussion, reporting and discussion, or they're going to regulate it. This last month when they had the stakeholder meeting, so unsurprisingly, there was very little fire service representation. It's back to why are we doing ourselves? Why are we getting ourselves hurt? We're not taking the steps necessary to prevent it. And this near-miss programs and near-miss reporting is the key to identifying problems.
And there's a lot of other industries that look at aviation, healthcare, and for power plants. There's a lot of other places where they are using near-miss more than we are. So, and most of those places have seen somewhere in the neighborhood of that 60 to 75 to 80% reduction in injuries. So there's no reason to assume that we wouldn't see the same results. It's just a matter of getting it adopted. It's just a new idea.
Yeah, in fact, the firefighter near-miss reporting system was fashioned after the aviation near-miss reporting system with Dr. Robert Helmrich consulting with the fire service, and he was pivotal in creating the aviation safety reporting system out of the University of Texas. And the fundamental difference between aviation near-miss reporting and the fire service near-miss reporting. In aviation, they have on average, well, not on average, at the time I last looked, about 47,000 near misses reported in a year. Think about that. All you got to get on a plane and fly home. But how is it that aviation could have 47,000 near miss reports filed in the course of a year? It all comes down to one very fundamental concept: immunity. Anybody in aviation that goes to the aviation safety reporting system and reports their near miss has immunity from discipline. That's how a pilot just takes something just absolutely fabricated. Could a pilot and a co-pilot be on their laptops and completely overfly an airport and go hundreds of miles out of their way to the point where fighter jets are scrambled because they think it's the next terrorist attack, and not lose their jobs? Yeah. If they report the near miss, call the whistle on themselves, say how it happened, how they got distracted, they have immunity. In that case, they could have reported the near misses while they were still in flight because they had their computers connected to the internet. But, you say, well, how could somebody do something like that and still keep their job? In the fire service, we don't have the, what Decker would call the just culture. We are still looking for penalties and consequences for people who make mistakes. And as long as we have the culture, if you make a mistake, there's going to be penalty and consequence. No one's going to call the whistle on themselves with their mistake and say, I messed up, I screwed up, and I want everybody to know it. Because they're going to get in trouble, because the boss is going to come down and say, well, you violated a policy when you did that. Well, maybe they didn't violate the policy on purpose, but nonetheless they did violate the policy. Maybe the policy is do a 360, but I didn't do a 360 because there was a sense of urgency, because there was a kid hanging out one of the windows, so we went right to rescuing the kid. Well, that makes good sense to do that, but you still violated the policy of not doing the 360, and there could be consequence because of policy violation. We have to work harder on being a just culture and taking away the consequence and the fear mindset that if I call the whistle on myself and report my near miss, that I'm going to get into trouble. We should be celebrating those near misses. And I know it's hard as a boss, I was a fire chief, it's hard to celebrate the fact that somebody violated a policy and now we're going to celebrate the fact that they did. And what we're celebrating is the fact that they called the whistle on themselves so that we could learn from it. Learn how not to let that happen again. And most of those policy violations are not happening with conscious egregiousness of, well, that's a stupid policy, so I'm not following it. That's not the case at all. They often have very good reasons as to why they didn't follow the policy, but they're still fearful of the consequence of not following it, so they don't report it.
Okay. Josh, Andrew, any final comments here? And then I'll move on.
Just real quick, I'll say that one of the things that I hear that we deal with our current generation of firefighters, especially in training, they always have the why. Why do we do it this way? Why do you want me to do this again? Why? That's fantastic. That's exactly what we're asking people to do. When things go wrong, ask why. Capitalize on that curiosity of this generation of firefighters and let them ask the question, why? They want to know, they want to talk about it. Don't push it to the side. Bring it to the forefront, get it out there, and talk about it.
All right. Thank you. Going to go on to, we have one last comment. I'll take it here.
I think I can yell pretty loudly too.
Okay.
The other thing, having been in the medical morbidity and mortality kind of factors analysis, near-miss analysis, and in the aviation, the one thing that I think I see where there's room for improvement as well is the closing the loop. So in aviation, despite the fact that there are different squadrons and different planes and different missions, it would all be submitted to the safety center. They would have a publication each month that would say, here's a little vignette of what happened, here's how to avoid it. So the idea is learn from someone else's near miss, so you don't make it. And I think that we try to do that in our department, but I think if you look at this, some of these themes are recurrent again and again. What kills the most firefighters, I think those type of things we ought to have ready-made materials to provide daily safety briefs, to do a turnover, to do those, to really remind people of, here's the most important thing you need to be safe.
That's a great point, and I think you'll see that the IFC National Near Miss program is going in that direction to provide that to their constituency across the country. So that's an excellent point and a direction I think that's going. One of the things that would be interesting here, since a comment I'll make is each of these cases is reviewed twice, is double reviewed by SMEs for accuracy and to redact the case and make it anonymous and that sort of thing. What if those SMEs also looked for a little bit of root cause analysis in the end? And in this one, for instance, it might be never assume that every scene is a violent scene, and that sort of thing. That might help the process even more because you've actually got really good experts, such as Andrew, looking at the cases themselves. So that's something we might consider adding. Okay, thank you all very much. I'm going to move us on. This one we have is a very interesting one from the hazmat world. A Freon leak that is mistaken for smoke.
I'm going to paraphrase this one,
Oh, goody. Okay, yes. Okay, so there was a dispatch for a fire alarm, 18-story high-rise. Some of the floors do not have sprinklers. About the time the first engine was dispatched, another came into service and took the call. Most of the station personnel were aware of the building, and that every fire alarm came in was a real thing unless proven otherwise. So when they arrived, the engine could hear the alarm sounding, and met with a security guard. Stated the basement and the third floor were showing smoke indications on the alarm panel. They proceeded to the basement, had access to the mechanical area was stopped due to a locked door. A couple large windows showed smoky haze in the mechanical area, so it looked like there was fire. They ordered the crew back upstairs, and dispatch upgraded the call. Let's see here. So they added more crews. The crew of Engine 2 donned their SCBAs. Together the high-wire supplies equipment. They prepared. This one does have a lot of detail. And at the same time, right about then, Engine 1 arrived on the scene with 3 and formed an attack team with Engine 2. Battalion arrived and assumed command. A ladder truck arrived, other trucks of that sort. All indicators for the source of the smoke pointing toward a malfunctioning or overheating piece of mechanical equipment, which the attack team should have quickly found and secured. All units were kept at the scene until that confirmation was sounded on the radio, but that transmission did not come. Engine 2 had a head start on the other folks that proceeded to the basement and began looking for the source of smoke with a thermal imager. The driver of Hazmat 1 arrived and added command that he would be attaching Engine 1 and met up with the engine. All members had their PPE on, including SCBA, but did not go on air prior to the entering the basement area. The haze was actually turned out to be a leak that was thought to be smoke, leak of Freon from one of 2 AC units. Engine 1 was exposed to Freon at the base of the stairs. They immediately began feeling the effects of the Freon with shortness of breath, etc. One firefighter was so overcome, he stated that he was telling himself he just needed to lie down for a minute in the middle of the event. The crew quickly realized that they were not dealing with ordinary smoke. They proceeded to don their face pieces. The exposure began to affect some motor skills, and even donning the face pieces turned out to be a bit of a challenge. This same time, the other engine, Engine 2, who was on air, I'm sorry, they announced on the radio that the source could be a possible Freon leak. And then with 1 minute of that transmission, they saw a firefighter stumbling on top of the stairs and then crash into a large glass window. So they were seeing a lot of effects from this.
Number of affected persons was a total of 4 that were transported for further evaluation. One member of Engine 2, who was doing forcible entry work on air in the basement, was apparently exposed through a loose facepiece seal. The lesson learned here was that firefighting is a visually stimulating profession that can often bite us if we don't have our guard up at all times. It's easy to become complacent and apathetic on what's called a routine call. The reality is that no one call is routine. With the advancements in technology and the use of industrial chemicals, the art of firefighting has never been more dangerous than it is today. Having the courageous self-leadership to don your PPE and SCBA on any call must exist. So this sounds from a different perspective a lot like the last call. And the issue here is one of perhaps believing and seeing. You know what you're going to, you know what's going to happen, you know what to get, you see some of the signs that that's what you've got, and then you have a worldview, you have a belief that this is the case and nothing is going to change that for you. In the previous case, they came in and they made the assumption that there was something else going on here. In this case, that assumption was not made, and we had injuries to firefighters. Okay, so this time, let me, if I could, turn it over to Josh for the first comments.
The first part that stands out in this is the 2 words in the whole paragraph there: ordinary smoke. I don't think ordinary smoke exists anymore. With the products of combustion that we face today, every fire is a hazmat event, and that's how we should treat it. I think we are fortunate, whether it's through grants, government support, fundraising, whatnot. Our equipment is better. It's more readily available than it's ever been. Wear it. It's that simple. Do not assume anything. Keep your guard up. These gentlemen, these firefighters had their equipment with them. They just failed to utilize it. I think that would bug me more than anything to know that they had what they needed to stay safe, and they didn't use it. Because you almost feel like at that point you have done everything you can do, shy of showing up and dressing, and we can't do that. So I think this is a little bit of complacency here. I'm sure light smoke, we can handle this. It's a mechanical malfunction. We're going to go in here and flip a switch. Again, we can't make those assumptions anymore. Our job has changed too much to just assume and think that everything is just the standard 99 out of 100 calls that we've ran. Because our job has changed tremendously, and it's changing almost faster than we can keep up in some areas.
Yep, understood. Andrew, can I toss it to you for a comment?
Yeah, I think like from the line firefighter point of view, like, stuff like this does happen, and I think there's that balance between being completely prepared for everything and then, realistically applying that to a real situation. And I don't mean that at all to sound like an excuse, but there's going to be times where we've got to really be vigilant because it's easy, especially if this is a larger building. We're going in, we're going to transit to where the problem is, so we're going in with packs and masks hanging, ready to go to work, but we really have to remember that there's a difference between the automatic alarm and the nuisance alarm, and one where we actually do see signs of something going on. And I kind of think that's the dividing line. It's one thing to have an alarm and you're going to investigate, or you're going down to check a piece of equipment that looks like it's overheated, but if on the way you begin to see signs of some sign visually or audibly that there's something on a spec, that's kind of the point where you need to stop and maybe we need to get all of our gear on. Because then that's kind of an easy field thing to use, because I think it's tough to say that we should have our SCBA in all the time, because in reality we know that when we're going to a situation like this, every guy is going to be on air going all the way into that building, especially depending on where you're coming in, you're going to get there and have your valve tapped out. And so you're not going to be that effective. But I think that tipping point is when we see, again, we're expecting if we go to a fire alarm that there's a fire there. If we see something that starts to confirm that, then we need to get ready to go to work. And I think that's kind of a good dividing line. So at this point, when you're coming in and you see a haze in there, really at that point you don't need to know what it is, like Josh said. Today, no matter what the smoke's made out of, it's going to make you sick and give you cancer 15, 20 years down the road at the very least. So what we need to do is at that point we need to gear up and go to work. So.
Dr. Gasaway, I see you in agreement there.
Yeah, clearly one of the things that stood out for me is the firefighters had their SCBAs on, but they were not on air prior to entering the basement. Couple that with the fact that there's another pretty important clue here that would have me scratching my head, and that is that the security guard reported smoke indications on the basement level and the third floor. So let's say there's a basement, a first floor, a second floor, a third floor. These are 4 floors apart between the what is indicated in the basement and on the third floor. And I don't know that has anything to do with what happened here, but that would put me on guard as to why I have indications 4 floors apart. If it was fire, I'd be thinking arson. Somebody started a fire in the basement, then they went up to the third floor and started another fire. So my guard would be up about why I would have, not to say that a system that malfunctions can't malfunction in that way, but I would find that to be a little unusual for me. But my big concern was, again, the complacency of not being on air. And then one thing that the reporter wrote was, firefighting is a visually stimulating profession. I'm not sure that I understood exactly what he or she meant by visually stimulating, other than if they were trying to say that we tend to form our situational awareness mostly on visual information, then I would agree that we do. That vision is our predominant sense of the 5 senses. But as you had talked about confirmation, well, you used a different word, but I'll throw confirmation bias in of you seeing what you expect to see. At some point, if you see smoke, you should smell smoke. And now, I will show my naivety here. I've never been in the presence of a Freon leak in my career. Just call me blessed or something. But I don't know what Freon leaking looks like or smells like, but I know that smoke smells like smoke. And if they were in the presence of smoke, because they were in the environment that overcame them, I'm curious, I'm not judging, I'm just curious as to why they would see something that looks like smoke but doesn't smell like smoke, and it wouldn't fly some flag of curiosity to them.
Why there's that discontinuity?
Yeah. Now, clearly, we know neurologically that vision trumps all the other senses. So if you see something and you hear something that's incongruent, you are most likely to defer to your vision as the dominant indicator of truth or reality. That's just neurologically. It's the visual processor is the biggest of the 5 sensory processors, so vision trumps the other ones, and we tend to defer to what we visually see. So it could be that they were, lawed into seeing something that looked like smoke, and therefore believed it to be smoke when in fact it wasn't. The second thing or the third, fourth, wherever I am at in my rant here. Engines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, ladders 1, 2, medic 1, 2, hazmat 1, battalion 2. Was there a thermal imaging camera on this scene anywhere? And I don't know if there was. Maybe their department just doesn't have any. I'd be curious. One of the questions I would ask is, do you have a thermal imaging camera, and was it inside, and was it turned on, and did it indicate anything that would give you the idea that there was any heat to what you were visually observing? And that would be another clue to help form situational awareness. When you see that much Freon and it's cold, I would assume that Freon would be cold. In other words, it wouldn't be showing up on the imager as any kind of heat. That would be an indicator that maybe this isn't smoke at all. I don't know. Again, they may not have imagers, but I know departments that have imagers that don't use them consistently. It's like having your SCBA in your hanging around your neck and you're not using it.
You take the visual cue just one step further. We've got to, through training, cultural mindset, get people to understand that we can sit in this room right here and I don't see anything that is going to harm me. But if you see something that you know is not right, don't take that in. Don't put yourself in that situation without taking the necessary precautions. We should aim for a zero impact or intake, whatever the word is here, anything foreign in our body. we should never accept, well, it's just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because a little bit is too much.
Yeah.
When we have the equipment and the technology that we do today,
Right.
there's no excuse.
Right. Right on.
Right, thank you. So some of the things I've heard here so far from the panel is confirmation bias. Don't, once you decide what you think you got, start assuming that that isn't what you have, and things that disagree with, question the situation. Also, that you should assume, like we, in our last case we said, assume that every case might be a violence case. Assume that every role that you want case. And might be a hazmat situation. So, has anybody else in the audience rolled on a fire, thought they had a fire, and it turned out to be hazmat, or have a hazmat aspect to it? Can you share some of the case with us at all?
Well, while you're looking for your speaker, I want to reiterate what Josh said. Every fire is a hazmat.
Yeah.
Right.
And we got to just start getting of that mindset. And you were golden with that piece of advice. You know, the smoke is nasty as any other hazmat we're going to deal with. I mean, you look at what smoke is today. It's nothing more than decomposing, melting down plastic and hydrocarbons full of carcinogens. You're breathing any of it is no longer acceptable.
We would never take that mindset into a hazmat to say, this is a hazmat incident, so it's okay if I get a little bit.
Yeah, if I just, yeah.
We got to take that same mindset into the fireground because it's a hazmat.
Right,
So
right.
smoke is hazmat.
Right.
And that should be a mantra. Anybody help me out in the audience? Anybody got something they can add that will help us to understand this case or something from your own experiences?
That goes for car fires too.
Yeah.
People, come on.
Yeah.
There's more hazmat in a car fire than there is in anything else. Or as much.
This should have been, the crew that went in was out there, even having their mask on, that's the beginning of the end right there. Even without the thermal imaging. We had a lot of duty down here in Texas. And when I did the risk assessment on it, looking at it, the root cause of it was in my opinion, is the officer failed to take his ticket. And had he done that, I think he would have seen what got him killed. And then it's the same thing here. You're going into a toxic environment. It's dangerous. Until you can verify otherwise, you should have your impact. Period.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. And that's where
They can share with us. Go ahead, back up.
that's where the reporter talks of complacency and apathy. You know, so they're realizing it. Routine.
And I don't want to pick on a department because that's not what we're here to do.
Not at all.
This is not the first time this happened.
No.
They have went on this alarm before without their air packet.
Yeah.
My guys do. I know this happens, but when you see it happening, you have to address it right then. Because if you don't, then you just made it okay to do it.
How many times your fire department beg for thermal imagers, new air packs, all the latest
Yeah.
and greatest and new
Yep.
gas detectors and stuff, and then they make the call, and where do they sit? On the truck.
Yeah, we work to get grant supported equipment sometimes, and we work really hard and we issue it to firefighters that it's bought and paid for, and it's not costing them anything to use it. And then we're not getting that connection between, when we got it, we put it in the trucks, and we put it in their backs, and getting it used in the field sometimes. And that, I think that's just, some of that is a resistance to change, like we have, it's kind of an issue we have across the board in the fire service, you know.
And you mentioned, I think every member of the panel mentioned complacency. It is human nature that familiarity breeds contempt.
Right.
And we have to fight that continuously. At a nuclear weapons site where I was emergency manager, we had a plutonium building burned down. Bad stuff, but they were all used to it. So one of the firefighters was looking for where the fire was, and he went up on the top of the building and looked around, opened a vent, smelled. He says, "Yep, that's it, right there, right below me," and he died eventually from radiation effects. So, you know, we all get complacent when we're familiar with the surroundings, and that has to be fought continuously. I'd like to say we appreciate your participation, coming to the session, talking with us about your experiences and giving the feedback. And especially would like to thank our three panelists for bringing their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience to bear. I think has been invaluable to all of us who had a chance to listen to them. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Reed Hodgen, for moderating the panel. Thank you to Chief Waldo and to Training Officer Beck for participating in this with me, and to Laura Bell from the Near Miss Reporting System for providing me with the opportunity to participate in this important discussion of the lessons that we can learn from firefighter near misses.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gasaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgasaway.com.